Imagine being barred from your own father's 60th birthday, mocked as a failure by your family, only to reveal you're the CEO of the very empire they're standing in. That's where Kinsley's story begins. Stick around, because the truth is about to turn their world upside down. I never thought my own family would go so far as to block me from attending my father's 60th birthday celebration. Yet here I was, standing on the marble steps outside the Crest Haven, as my sister Emma planted herself in front of the entrance like a gatekeeper in designer heels. The Grand Hotel towered behind her, all glass and stone, its luxury understated and impeccable, just as I'd intended when I built it. "You're not serious," I said, adjusting the sleeve of my black silk dress. One simple seam, yet it cost more than Emma's car payment. Not that she'd know. "Is my father too?" Emma's lips curled into a familiar, self-satisfied smirk. "Look, Kinsley, this isn't lunch at Applebee's. The Crest Haven is exclusive." She stretched the word out like she was tasting it. "The tasting menu alone costs more than you probably make in a quarter." She glanced at her reflection in the glass, flicking invisible lint from her shoulder. Mom and Dad were clear. They only want people here who represent the family well. The irony nearly made me laugh. Just yesterday, I'd signed off on a $160 million expansion plan for the Crest Haven collection. And today, I was apparently not even good enough to step inside one of my own properties. 10 years ago, I'd walked away from the family's sleepy accounting firm in Denver to chase a dream in luxury hospitality. My father's parting words still echoed, "No daughter of mine is going to be a glorified concierge." So, I let them believe that's exactly what I became. Let them assume I was folding napkins and bussing tables in some nameless hotel. Meanwhile, I built Sterling Haven Estates into one of the fastest-growing luxury hotel groups in North America. The concierge now owned 28 five-star properties across 3 countries. "Kinsley." My mother's voice sliced through the cold air. She appeared behind Emma, brows drawn in a familiar look of tight disapproval. "What are you doing here? We discussed this." No, they had discussed it. I'd received a single text that morning. "Don't come to Dad's birthday. It's at the Crest Haven. You can't afford it. Don't embarrass us." I lifted a slim white envelope. I brought a gift. Inside was the deed to a private hillside villa in Napa Valley, the latest addition to the Sterling Haven signature collection. My plan had been to present it tonight, both as a birthday gift and a quiet unveiling of the truth. Emma tilted her head. "Let me guess. An Amazon gift card?" I smiled faintly. "Something like that." For a moment, I considered turning around. Let them have their illusion. Let them think I was still the family dropout with overpriced dreams and no direction. But then I remembered everything behind those glass doors existed because I dared to leave. And tonight, so would the truth. "Oh, what is it?" Emma scoffed, eyeing the envelope in my hand. "A gift card to Olive Garden?" She laughed, the sound sharp and performative. "Or maybe you scraped together enough tips to get him something from the clearance rack at the mall." My mother's gaze narrowed, zeroing in on my clutch. A minimalist piece of hand-stitched Italian leather, one of a kind and quietly elegant. It had cost more than Emma's Audi, but they didn't need to know that. "Whatever it is," my mother said with a tilt of her chin, "I'm sure your sister's gift is more appropriate. She just made junior partner at her firm." I knew. Just like I knew that same firm was currently negotiating to lease 2 floors in one of my commercial buildings downtown, desperately trying to lock in a discount rate before the quarter ended. "Emma is doing so well," Mom continued, her voice softening with pride. "New home in Cherry Hills, luxury SUV, and that wonderful fiancé of hers. So driven, so polished." She gave me a slow once-over, eyes pausing on my understated dress. "And you?" "Well, at least you're trying." I thought about the penthouse I owned in New York with floor-to-ceiling views of the Hudson, the curated garage of collector cars, the private jet I had boarded at sunrise. "Yes," I said. "At least I'm trying." Emma smirked. "Speaking of effort, that dress." Her eyes sparkled with contempt. This is the Crest Haven, not a truck stop. I glanced down at the jet black silk draped perfectly over my frame. It had been custom designed in Paris by a label that had quietly blacklisted Emma after her last tantrum at a showroom, but I didn't mention that. It's what I could manage, I said evenly. Well, you can't come in, she said flatly. We reserved the VIP floor. It's for family and distinguished guests only. The VIP floor. My floor. The one I had renovated personally last fall, curating the art, commissioning the chandeliers, and handpicking the imported tiles from a quarry in southern Italy. The distinguished guests being? I asked, playing along. Oh, you wouldn't know them, my mother said, flapping a hand. The Winthrops. He's a senior partner at that top firm. The Hendersons, old family money, and Mr. Larson from the bank. All very important people. I bit back a smile. Winthrop leased 3 properties from my commercial portfolio. The Hendersons had been begging for an invitation to my Aspen retreat for months, and Mr. Larson's bank had just submitted a loan request to my holding company. Right, I nodded. Very important. Exactly, Emma said, pleased. So, you see why you can't be here? What would people think if they found out Dad's failure of a daughter was working the event? Emma, my mother said in a scolding tone. But her eyes glimmered with quiet agreement. Be nice. Kinsley made her choices. If she had stayed in the family firm like you, maybe tonight would have been different. I smiled slightly. Oh, tonight would be different. Just not in the way they expected. The family firm, once the pride of our name, now occupied a modest second-floor office in one of my mixed-use buildings. They were always late on rent, always requesting just a little more time. I never denied them, but I never gave them discounts either. Just then, Nathan appeared at the entrance, adjusting his tie with that nervous energy he always tried to pass off as confidence. What's taking so long? Everyone's waiting for... He stopped mid-sentence when he saw me. His face tightened like a pulled string. Kinsley, didn't expect to see you here. Clearly not, I said, my voice cool. Nathan just made vice president, my mother said quickly, grasping for control of the conversation. She rested a hand on his shoulder like she was presenting a trophy. Junior vice president, I corrected gently, my tone pleasant. I knew his exact title because the bank he worked for handled some of Sterling Haven's smaller vendor accounts. Nathan's jaw shifted. Emma shot me a look of pure irritation. Well, still more impressive than whatever it is you're doing, she snapped. What is it now? Assistant manager at some cafe chain? I thought back to the board meeting I had left earlier that morning, where we reviewed final documentation for the acquisition of Nathan's bank. The ink was practically dry. The press release would go out next week. Something like that, I said lightly. This is ridiculous, my mother interjected. Kinsley, just go. You're making a scene. I'll tell your father you couldn't make it. Couldn't afford it, more like, Emma chimed in with a smug smile. I looked past them through the arched entryway into the Crest Haven's gleaming lobby. The marble floors I had personally selected. The Murano glass chandeliers I'd commissioned. The modernist paintings I had sourced during a gallery trip through Europe. Every inch of it mine. For a moment, I considered walking away. Let them have their curated fantasy. Let them believe the version of me they had always preferred. Struggling, invisible, forgettable. But then I remembered what my first mentor, a woman who built her empire from scratch, once told me. Success means little if you can't look someone in the eye and own it. I stood taller. My heels clicked against the granite as I stepped forward. I think I'll stay, I said quietly. Before my mother could respond, the glass doors swung open with a smooth hiss. Michael stepped outside, tall and composed in his tailored suit. He'd been with me since I bought my first fixer-upper 7 years ago. Is everything all right, Madam CEO? His voice carried with effortless authority. Your usual table is ready, and Chef Laurent delayed the tasting menu for your approval. The silence that followed was bone deep. Emma's lips parted in shock. Her blush now looked clownish against her pale complexion. My mother gripped the brass door handle, knuckles white. "Michael," I said, smiling warmly. Perfect timing. I turned to the stunned cluster of relatives. They were just explaining how I couldn't afford to dine here. Michael blinked. "Ma'am, with all due respect, you own the Cresthaven and the entire Sterling Haven chain." "Yes," I said, turning to them. "I do." I stepped back and gestured toward the entry. "Shall we go inside?" I looked directly at Emma. "I believe you reserved the VIP floor." If watching masks fall and truths rise gave you chills, subscribe to the channel because the next part of the story, that's where the real reckoning begins. You won't want to miss what happens when Kinsley takes her seat at her table. "My VIP floor, to be precise," I said. Nathan found his voice first, though it faltered. "This has to be some kind of joke. You're just a restaurant manager." He scoffed. "Actually," Michael interjected, his tone calm but firm, "Miss Harper is the founder and CEO of Sterling Haven Hospitality Group." He glanced at them evenly. "She owns all 17 Cresthaven hotels across 3 countries, along with our luxury resorts and fine dining brands." Emma's designer clutch slipped from her wrist, landing with a loud clack against the marble. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. "But that's impossible," she finally stammered. "The Cresthaven brand is worth billions." I finished smoothly, which makes your comment about me not being able to afford the tasting menu rather amusing. I stepped through the entrance and into the heart of my hotel. The lobby staff straightened at the sight of me, all offering polite nods or warm greetings. "Good evening, Miss Harper," said Clara at the front desk. "The executive suite is ready for the celebration." "Thank you, Clara." I turned back toward my family, who still hovered in the entryway as if passing the threshold would rewrite their version of reality. "Coming?" They followed in stunned silence, eyes sweeping the marble floors, the bespoke lighting, the art installations sourced from my private collection. Suddenly, they were seeing everything. Me, for the first time. "But your dress," my mother finally said, her voice unsure. "It's so simple." "Custom," I replied casually. "Paris, around $30,000 if I remember right. I stopped checking price tags years ago." I led them to the private elevator, removing a sleek black keycard from my clutch. "Unlike Emma's dress," I added, glancing at my sister, which I believe is a knockoff. "Valentino hasn't released that line yet." "I know. I was at the private preview in Milan." The elevator doors opened into the VIP lounge where the birthday celebration was already underway. The room hushed as we stepped in. "Kinsley." My father rose from his seat at the head of the table, his brow furrowed in confusion. "What are you doing here? Your mother said you couldn't afford it." "I offered," I said, finishing his sentence as I walked toward him. I reached into my bag and handed him the envelope containing the deed. "Happy birthday, Dad. I hope you don't mind me crashing the party in my own hotel." "Your hotel?" A familiar voice interrupted. Mr. Larson from the bank stepped forward, his eyes wide. "Miss Harper, I had no idea you were connected to the Morgans." He looked between me and Michael with dawning realization. "We've been trying to schedule a meeting with you for months regarding that financing proposal." "Kinsley owns the Cresthaven?" another guest asked. "It was William Winthrop, the attorney leasing 3 of my downtown properties." "My God, James," he added, turning to my father. "Your daughter is the mystery CEO who's been quietly acquiring the best real estate in the city." My father sat back down heavily, all color drained from his face. "All this time," he whispered, "we thought you were just a glorified waitress." I smiled faintly and raised an eyebrow. "No, Dad. I just kept my head down while I built everything you said I couldn't." "Your words, I believe," I said, watching my father's face pale. "From the day I left the family firm to pursue a future in hospitality." "But why didn't you tell us?" my mother demanded, still gripping her string of pearls like a lifeline. "Would you have believed me?" I asked, voice quiet but unflinching. You didn't believe in me 10 years ago when I asked for your support? Why would I share my success with people who only measure worth by last names and bank balances? I paused, my gaze sweeping the stunned room. Though by that metric, I suppose I'm worth more than everyone here combined. Emma sank into the nearest chair, her face drained of all color. The villa in Napa Valley, she whispered. The one I tried to book last summer, the one no one could get into. Mine, I said calmly. Just like the office building your firm is struggling to lease, Nathan. And the resort membership you've been waitlisted for, Mother. Kinsley, my father started, his voice uneven. Save it. I raised my hand. I didn't do this to humiliate you, though I've been humiliated plenty over the years. I did this because I'm tired of shrinking myself to protect your egos. I turned and addressed the room. Please enjoy the party. Everything tonight is on the house. My house, I began walking toward the elevator, then stopped and looked back at my father. Oh, and the envelope Emma refused to let me hand you. It's the deed to a villa in Sonoma, one of my most exclusive estates. Consider it a birthday gift from your failure of a daughter. The next hour felt like stepping through an alternate timeline. Suddenly, the same people who'd barely nodded at me during past family gatherings were hanging on every word I said. The Hendersons practically begged for a second chance at that resort membership. Mr. Larson cornered me to revisit his bank's loan application. Meanwhile, my family sat like spectators in a stadium that had turned on them. Emma's fiancé disappeared shortly after overhearing that her future partnership depended on leasing an office she couldn't afford. Nathan kept pacing near the bar, thumbing through his phone, likely updating his resume. My mother drifted from group to group, oscillating between silent tears and theatrical stories about how she'd always seen potential in me. It would have been comical if it hadn't been so painfully transparent. As the celebration quieted, I stepped out onto the terrace for a breath of cool air. My father was already there, staring at the city skyline. He didn't turn when I approached. These buildings, he said, pointing across the lights. How many do you own? Enough, I said, joining him at the railing, including the one the family firm operates out of. He nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the horizon. I was wrong about you, Kinsley. So terribly wrong. Yes, I replied. You were. He looked at me. Can you ever forgive us? I thought about it. About the years of silence, the dismissals, the laughs behind closed doors. Forgiveness isn't really the issue, I said. Respect is. You never respected my choices. You only respect what's proven. I smiled faintly. Well, now you can tell your friends your daughter owns the Crest Haven. That should give you something to say at your next dinner party. I left him there, alone with his thoughts, and headed to my private office on the top floor. Tomorrow, the family dynamic would be different. Emma would no longer be the golden child. My mother would begin rewriting history in real time. And Nathan's entire bank was on my acquisition list. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told you weren't enough, I see you. Leave a comment below and tell me what you would have done in my shoes. I read every message, and your voice matters here. And if you believe in quiet strength, long games, and proving them wrong without ever raising your voice, subscribe. There's more to my story, and I want you with me when the next chapter unfolds. My advice: don't waste your energy trying to impress people who only clap for success they can brag about. Build in silence. Succeed anyway. This journey taught me a hard but vital lesson. Never dim your light to fit someone else's shadow. For years, I hid my success to avoid their judgment. But owning my truth showed me that real strength lies in standing tall, even when it stings. The only approval I need is my own. Have you ever been underestimated or pushed aside? Drop a comment and tell me how you'd handle Kinsley's shoes, or share your own story of proving them wrong. I read every word, and your voice fuels this journey. Subscribe for the next chapter, and let's keep building in silence, succeeding anyway. Imagine standing in a room full of family, your heart open, only to hear your brother call your life's work a failure. On a microphone, to a laughing crowd. I'm Sadie, and that moment shattered me, but it also built me. Stay with me to see how betrayal became my blueprint for triumph. My useless sister needs to sell her failing company to me. That's what my brother said. Into a mic at a packed rooftop promotion party thrown in his honor. Laughter followed tight, smug corporate. My name is Sadie, and from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever stood in a room full of your own family and felt like a stain on the rug? Something they wanted to clean up before the next photo. I had come to support him genuinely. He just made junior partner at some Chicago investment firm. Ivy League MBA, polished speech, tailored suit. I gave him a congratulatory hug, handed him a bottle of vintage bourbon, and then watched him stab me in the chest with a smile. Let's be honest, he continued. My sister's little app is barely hanging on. I'll be doing her a favor. Right, Dad? Dad raised his glass. Let her go back to writing poems or whatever she studied. We need real strategy now. The crowd chuckled again. I didn't speak. I didn't defend myself. I just nodded slowly, turned away from the balcony lights, and walked out. No one followed me. No one asked how I felt. I guess it was easier to believe the lie than admit they never really knew who I was. At midnight, I sat in my one-bedroom apartment, surrounded by sticky notes, code drafts, and a half-eaten cupcake I had planned to gift him with a handwritten card that said, "For every sibling who grew from your shadow." I tore it in half. Then I opened my laptop, checked the back end, refreshed the numbers, and smiled because they didn't know. They didn't know I had just closed a licensing deal, one that would integrate my platform into a nationwide chain of health clinics. They didn't know I was already profitable, that the failing company they mocked had been silently thriving because I chose to build quietly while they shouted from balconies. They thought I'd roll over, that I'd hand over the code, the patents, the purpose, like I owed them proof of worth. But the next morning, when they showed up at my office to take over, they didn't find desperation. They found locks changed, lawyers waiting, and a press release already live announcing something that turned their smug little smile into absolute silence. At exactly 9:02 a.m., they walked in like kings. My brother in his pressed navy suit, flanked by two interns who looked fresh out of a TED Talk, holding leather briefcases like they were about to buy history. Dad trailed behind, smug and casual, sipping his overpriced coffee. The same way he sipped away my self-worth growing up. I was sitting behind my desk, cool, quiet, controlled, wearing the same black turtleneck they once joked made me look like a barista with too many opinions. They didn't even greet me, just walked in, arms outstretched like it was already theirs. Let's make this quick, my brother said, dropping a printed one-page offer on my desk. We're prepared to absorb the company's debt and give you a small equity slice. You'll stay on for a transition period. 6 months max. Dad nodded approvingly. See, he's being generous. You're lucky he's not just shutting it down. I glanced at the paper. One sentence, zero valuation accuracy, no mention of IP, no clue what they were actually stepping into. Absorb the debt, I said slowly, pushing the paper back across the desk. You mean the non-existent debt? The company that's been cash flow positive for 11 months straight. My brother blinked. What? I opened my laptop and spun it toward them. A dashboard glowing with live analytics, real-time user growth, licensing revenue, 3 major health networks on board, and most importantly, a headline from that morning's Tech Chronicle. Underdog app disrupts health tech sector. Founder Sadie Thompson lands $4.2 million round from Horizon Capital. The silence was glorious. Dad leaned forward, squinting at the screen like the truth would shrink if he glared hard enough. That's fake. You never told us. Exactly, I said. Because I knew if I did, you'd try to own it without understanding it. Like always. My brother's jaw tightened. You're bluffing. That's when I handed him the second folder. Legal documents, trademark registrations, a cease and desist draft addressed to him, pre-written the night before just in case. You made a public offer last night to purchase my company, I said calmly. It was unsolicited, unprofessional, and defamatory. If you make another public statement, I'll sue for attempted hostile acquisition and reputational damage." Dad stood there speechless. "You came to take over," I said, rising slowly. "But what you actually did was walk into the headquarters of a company you have zero rights to, and tried to turn your failure to believe in me into leverage." I walked to the door and held it open. "Now you can leave like businessmen, or security can escort you like liabilities." They walked, and this time I didn't cry, because for the first time in my life, they weren't louder. I was louder with results. By noon, the news had already hit every inbox that mattered. Horizon Capital backs Sadie Thompson's health tech platform in $4.2 million deal from Dropout to Disruptor, the woman behind the next big healthcare breakthrough. While my brother scrambled to save face and Dad ducked calls from their country club buddies, my phone rang with something much more satisfying. Opportunity. A senior executive from HealthWave, the same billion-dollar network that had once ghosted my emails, was now suddenly very interested. "Sadie," he said, "we'd like to revisit our last conversation." Translation: "You ignored me when I was invisible. Now that I have weight, you want to dance." I kept it polite, professional, but I didn't forget. Not the investor who said, "Maybe your brother should pitch instead." Not the client who referred to me as the artsy sibling with no grit. I didn't forget because I don't need to. My success didn't grow in spite of them. It grew under them like roots under concrete. Quiet, relentless, patient. By late afternoon, my inbox had over 70 unread messages, interview requests, podcast invites, partnership offers. One subject line stood out: urgent joint statement suggestion from family. I clicked from my brother's assistant, not even him directly. "We'd like to suggest a joint press release clarifying the confusion from the promotion party and framing this moment as a collaborative sibling success story." I stared at the email, read it twice, then closed it. No reply. They wanted to soften the story, not for me, but for themselves. They didn't mind erasing me when I was the dropout. But now that I was headline material, they wanted back in the frame. I booked a solo interview instead. That evening, sitting across from a journalist who asked, "How did it feel to be underestimated by your own family?" I didn't dodge the question. I said, "It felt like a storm I had to walk through without an umbrella, but I learned to dance in it." And when she asked what I'd say to my brother now, I gave her the truth. I'd say, "Thank you for showing me that silence isn't weakness. It's a strategy." Because while they were busy laughing on balconies, I was building a rocket in the basement. And now I wasn't just flying. I was out of their reach. A week after the headlines, I got a forwarded invite. Dad's 60th birthday. Private dinner. Black tie only. Hosted at his favorite steakhouse with close family and respected guests only. No seat for me. I didn't even make the BCC list. My name was scratched from the menu, but my company featured listed in his bio as a proud example of entrepreneurial spirit within the Thompson family. The irony, they refused to claim me in person, but had no problem milking my success for bragging rights. It wasn't just insulting, it was predictable. And this time, I wasn't going to let it slide. I didn't show up to beg for a chair. I didn't email, didn't argue. I simply made a call. One that took less than 5 minutes. You see, the Thompson birthday dinner was being held at the Grandview, a venue recently bought out by a luxury hospitality group I had just signed a health tech integration deal with. They knew me. They respected me. So when I explained very calmly that my father's party was about to use my image without permission, they didn't blink. They canceled the reservation last minute, without negotiation. When Dad's assistant called the restaurant to complain, she was told, "Unfortunately, the guest of honor's daughter is a client of ours, and she has final approval on all corporate branding." They moved the party to a second-choice location, a smaller, less glamorous venue across town. The same one my cousin used for her engagement dinner last year. No string quartet, no rooftop skyline, no brand-friendly aesthetics for the photos they'd planned to post online. And me, I booked a private dinner of my own. Not for revenge, for remembrance. I invited my lead engineer, my product manager, the UX intern who once cried when someone finally took her ideas seriously. We dined on our own terms, laughed from our bellies, shared a toast that meant something. To the misfits, I said, who were never invited to the party because we were too busy building the future. That night, I received a passive-aggressive text from Dad. "I heard what you did. You're making this personal." I didn't respond because it was never personal. It was positional, and I finally chose to sit where I belonged. Not at their table. At one I built myself. 3 days after the ruined dinner, I got an email from a glossy business magazine. They were featuring a story on modern family enterprises, and apparently my father had pitched himself as the patriarch of an entrepreneurial dynasty. The article draft was attached there, was in print. With his son leading a major finance firm and his daughter's tech company booming, Mr. Thompson is the proud architect of a family legacy grounded in vision and leadership. Architect? He hadn't written a single line of code, hadn't invested $1. The only thing he ever built was a wall between me and belief in myself. I stared at the article. My picture taken from a public source used without permission. My story reshaped. My name wrapped in a ribbon and tied to a man who didn't clap at my graduation because I didn't have one. I could have ignored it, let it go. But a racer in a silk suit is still a racer. So I picked up the phone and called the editor. "Hi, I'm Sadie Thompson, the daughter mentioned in your draft." A pause then. "Oh yes, your father's assistant coordinated that. We'd love to set up a quote." "No," I interrupted. Calm but firm. "What you printed isn't true. My father didn't help me build this company. In fact, he called it a waste of time up until last month." Silence. "I'm happy to go on record, but only with the truth. Otherwise, I'll have my legal team address the unauthorized use of my likeness." By that evening, the draft was revised. The article now read, "Sadie Thompson, founder and CEO of HealthLink, built her company from the ground up with no family capital or guidance, redefining what a self-made story looks like." And just like that, the narrative shifted. Not in my favor in realities, because here's the part my family never understood. They treated my silence as weakness, not strategy. They thought if I wasn't shouting, I must be shrinking. But I wasn't hiding. I was sharpening. That week, I gave a keynote at a Women in Tech Summit. Thousands in the room, cameras, lights. I told the audience, "You don't have to come from power to create it. You don't need legacy to build impact. Sometimes the ones who ignore you the longest give you the loudest reason to succeed." The applause wasn't polite. It was visceral. Because every woman in that room had been the afterthought at someone else's table. But I was living proof that when they cut you out of the photo, you make your own frame and hang it where the world can't miss it. Friday afternoon, sky gray, phone on silent. I was deep in wireframe reviews with my team when the receptionist pinged me. "Your father's here. Wants a word?" At first, I thought it was a mistake. But there he was, standing in the glass lobby of my headquarters. Same man who once told me, "You'll never get far without structure," or a man to structure it for you. Now he stood alone, hands tucked into his blazer like he didn't know what to do with them. I buzzed him in. He walked in slowly, scanning the clean, minimalist lines of the place like it was foreign territory, because it was. I hadn't invited him here. Not once. This wasn't a space he built. This was soil I cultivated after being exiled from his garden. "Nice place," he said, trying to be casual. I nodded. "It is." He cleared his throat. I figured it was time we had a real talk. I gestured to the seating area. He sat on the edge of the couch like he didn't belong in the room, and he didn't. "I saw the article," he said after a long pause. "Didn't realize you were going to go that public." "You made it public," I replied. "When you pitched me as part of your legacy without asking." He sighed. "That wasn't my intent, but it was your instinct," I said. "To center yourself to act like my work reflects you when all it reflects is the absence I had to outgrow." The weight of it landed heavy. Quiet. I wasn't perfect, he muttered, but I did what I thought was right. No, I said, leaning forward. You did what was easy. You praised the son who mirrored you and dismissed the daughter who challenged you. You made love conditional. And when I succeeded, you tried to rewrite the credits. Silence again. Then finally, he looked up. I'm not proud, not angry, empty. I don't know how to fix this. You don't. He blinked. I stood. You don't get to rewrite the story now. You don't get to wear my success like a badge, but you do get to watch it from the audience like everyone else. I offered my hand, not to shake, to guide him out. He stood slowly, nodded once, and walked toward the elevator. Right before the doors closed, he turned. I underestimated you. I know. The door shut, and I exhaled something I didn't even realize I'd been holding for years. Because that wasn't an apology, but it was a sentence, and I was done living between their commas. 2 days later, I got a text from my brother. First contact since the promotion party where he mocked me in front of hundreds and tried to turn my company into his punchline. Congrats on the press dinner sometime. Just us. I stared at it. The same brother who used to unplug my laptop mid-project when we were kids just to teach me resilience. The one who called my startup cute until the day it eclipsed his bonus. But I replied, sure, your office. Noon. I arrived with nothing but my phone, my silence, and a single printed article. The one where his own firm's analysts had reevaluated my valuation. He greeted me with that smug Ivy League smile he used to weaponize. But it faltered the moment he realized I hadn't come to reconcile. I'll cut to it, he said, trying to stay in control. You're winning right now. That's great. But these moments pass. Investors shift. Boards change. You need someone who understands that side of the game. I can help you scale. I tilted my head. Scale? I said. You mean the way you scaled that fund that just lost its third client? He flinched. I slid the article across the table. He didn't touch it. You know what's funny? I said, you tried to own what I built, and now you want to guide it because you finally realized I passed you. Quietly, permanently, he scoffed. Don't let your ego kill momentum, Sadie. My ego. I smiled. I was never allowed one. You and Dad made sure of that. But now that I've got some altitude, I'm keeping my hands on the wheel. He leaned back, frowning. I stood to leave. You see, when you announced that I'd be selling my failing company to you, you made a mistake. He raised an eyebrow. You thought I was playing to win your approval? I never was. I was playing to own my freedom. You don't know what that looks like because you've been playing to impress Dad your whole life. I walked toward the door. He called after me. So that's it. You won't even hear me out. I paused. Not until you say my name without sounding like it's attached to an asterisk. Then I left. Later that night, I checked LinkedIn. He'd posted a vague, inspirational quote. Sometimes the loudest one in the room is the most afraid. No likes, no traction, because the loudest one in his room had already left and taken the spotlight with her. 6 months later, I stood on a stage in Seattle looking out at a room of 500 founders. Most of them women, most of them like me, told they didn't belong at the table unless they were bringing the napkins. My keynote was titled, Built from the Discarded. And I told the truth about being the sibling who was always introduced with qualifiers. About the father who never asked what I did, just how it made him look. About the promotion party where I was publicly offered up like a pity asset, and the silence that followed when I turned out to be the real storm. The applause was long, not polite, not curated, earned. That night, as I rode the elevator back up to my suite, my phone buzzed. A message from Mom. Saw the live stream. You were poised. Professional. Maybe a little harsh, but still. Congrats. I stared at the message for a moment, then locked my phone without responding because I didn't need their commentary. I had clarity. When I opened the door to my suite, a small group from my team was already waiting. Champagne chilling, phones buzzing with partnership offers from two major health networks that had just watched my talk. "Any regrets?" my lead developer asked, handing me a glass. I shook my head. "No," I said. "I used to want their respect, but now I've got something better." "What's that?" "Distance and a view." We clinked glasses. That night, I walked out onto the balcony alone, the wind brushing past my face like a curtain lifting on the final act. I thought of the party where I was humiliated, of the office where I shut down their takeover, of the article, the uninvited dinner, the meetings they tried to twist back into control, and how none of it worked. Because you can't inherit what you never built. You can't lead something you never carried. And you can't claim someone's story, not when they've already written the ending. That ending, it didn't include apologies. It included ownership, not just of a company, of my voice, of my value, of my name without an asterisk. So if you ever hear someone call me the dropout again, let them. Because now when they come looking for the next big thing, they're walking through doors I built under a name they tried to bury. And every light above them shines because I flipped the switch. Sadie sat alone in her apartment, the sting of her brother's words still fresh. She realized then that seeking their approval had been her cage. The lesson hit hard. Her worth wasn't tied to their validation, but to the quiet strength she'd built in the shadows. Embracing that truth set her free to own her story. From a mock dropout to a health tech disruptor, I rewrote my ending. What's a moment that made you rise above doubt? Drop it in the comments. Let's inspire each other. Hit that share button and tag someone who needs to hear this story. I built a $20 million empire from nothing, supported everyone I loved, and still got called a lowlife by the one person who should have had my back. Stick around, because when I walked away, their world crumbled and mine soared. I'm Scarlett Mitchell, and I've never known the comfort of a safety net. Growing up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in a cramped one-bedroom apartment, life was a patchwork of thrift store clothes and my mom's late-night shifts at the diner. Mom Laura was my rock, a woman with calloused hands and a heart that refused to let poverty dim her spirit. She'd come home at midnight smelling of coffee and grease and still find the energy to read me library books about far-off places like Paris or Yellowstone. "The world's bigger than Tulsa, Scarlett," she'd say, her eyes bright despite the exhaustion. Those moments curled up on our sagging couch planted a seed in me, a hunger to see that world and make her proud. Money was always tight. Mom skipped meals so I could have seconds, and she'd walk me to free community festivals, pointing out dancers from Ireland or drummers from Mobile, teaching me about cultures she'd only read about. I soaked it all in, especially the Spanish words she'd sprinkle in from her high school classes, hoping I'd dream bigger than our circumstances. But by the time I hit high school, I saw the toll it took on her. Bills piling up, her shoes wearing thin. I couldn't bear watching her sacrifice anymore. At 16, I made a choice. I'd graduate high school and start working. No college, no delays. Mom begged me to reconsider. "Your honey, education's your ticket out," she'd say, her voice cracking. But I was stubborn. I wanted to lift her burden to give her a life where she didn't have to count pennies for groceries. That decision wasn't easy. I lay awake at night wondering if I was throwing away my future. But I felt this fire inside, a need to prove I could make it, degree or not. I didn't know then that my knack for picking up Spanish from a friend would open doors, or that the world Mom showed me through books would become my reality. All I knew was that I had to try for her, and for me. Looking back, that choice was the first step toward everything, toward love, heartbreak, and a strength I didn't know I had. In high school, I met Isabella Lopez, a girl who changed my life. She'd moved to Tulsa from Puerto Rico, her family scraping by just like mine. We clicked instantly, two kids who knew what it was like to wear hand-me-downs and dodge questions about weekend plans we couldn't afford. Isabella had this spark, always laughing, teaching me Spanish phrases while we shared cheap burgers at lunch. "Vamos a recorrer el mundo?" she'd tease, meaning I want to travel the world. I'd stumble over the words, but she'd cheer like I'd nailed it. Those moments made me feel like I could do anything. By senior year, I was fluent enough to hold real conversations in Spanish, thanks to Isabella. When I told her I wasn't going to college, she nodded. No judgment. She was skipping it too, chasing a job in event planning. We promised to stay in touch, but life pulled us apart after graduation. I landed a gig at a travel agency in Tulsa, a small outfit that needed someone to talk to Spanish-speaking clients. My heart raced the first time I booked a family's trip to Puerto Rico, translating their dreams into itineraries. It felt like I was touching the world Mom had shown me in books. The agency was where I found my footing. I worked long hours learning the ins and outs of travel, flights, hotels, cultural nuances. My bosses noticed my hustle, and soon I was handling bigger accounts. But it wasn't just about the paycheck. Every booking felt like a step toward proving I didn't need a degree to succeed. Still, doubt gnawed at me. Would Mom be disappointed? Was I enough? Those questions lingered, but the thrill of building something kept me going. Little did I know that job was just the start, and it would lead me to a man who turned my world upside down. At 26, I walked into the Blue Ridge Resort in Asheville, North Carolina for a client meeting, my laptop bag heavy with proposals. The lounge was all polished wood and mountain views, a world away from Tulsa's flat streets. That's where I met James Walker, a concierge with a smile that could melt doubts. He brought me coffee, tossing in a playful café con leche señorita in perfect Spanish. I laughed, surprised, and fired back. Solo negro, gracias. That spark of connection, our shared language, felt like fate. James was 30, charming with eyes that held stories. We started chatting during my visits to the resort, first about work, then about life. He told me about losing his dad as a teen, how he stayed close to his mom, Patricia, to keep her grounded. I shared about Mom's sacrifices, my drive to make her proud. Our talks grew longer, stealing moments between his shifts and my meetings. I felt alive, like I'd found someone who saw me. Not just the girl without a degree, but Scarlett, the dreamer. 6 months later, James proposed on a quiet ridge at sunset, the breeze whispering promises. I said yes, my heart soaring with visions of a life together. But when he asked me to move into his family's home in Asheville to look after Patricia, my stomach twisted. She's been alone since Dad passed, he said, his voice soft but firm. You work from home, so it'd be perfect, right? I hesitated, remembering Mom's warnings about rushing in. But James's assurance that he'd handle any issues with his mom eased my fears. I wanted to believe in our future, in the love that felt so real. So I packed my bags, unaware of the storm waiting for me. The first time I met Patricia Walker, James's mother, I felt like I'd stepped into a courtroom. We sat in her pristine Asheville living room, all plaid curtains and polished furniture, a stark contrast to my Tulsa apartment. Patricia, 58, had the poise of a former socialite, her silver hair swept into a tight bun. She asked about my job, my family, then zeroed in. What college did you attend? Her tone was polite, but her eyes were sharp, sizing me up. I swallowed hard. I didn't go to college, Mrs. Walker. I graduated high school and started working. Her smile froze and a long silence followed, heavy with judgment. High school? Well, that's quaint, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. I glanced at James, hoping for backup, but he just squeezed my hand, oblivious. That moment planted a seed of doubt, but I brushed it off. I loved James, and I'd make this work. Moving into their home was my first big test. Patricia's house was a shrine to her past. A life of charity balls and wealth before her husband's death left her struggling. James said she needed support, and since my travel agency work was remote, I agreed to help with chores. But Patricia's welcome was cold. Don't touch the china, she'd snap, or keep the floors spotless. Her rules felt like a leash, tightening with every passing day. I told myself it was temporary, that she'd warm up once she saw my effort. James promised to talk to her if things got tough, and I clung to that hope, ignoring the unease curling in my chest. I didn't yet see the shadow Patricia would cast over our life together. Living with Patricia was like walking on eggshells. Her demands started small, dust the shelves, vacuum daily, but soon snowballed into a full-time job. Your room needs cleaning by 9 a.m. sharp. She'd bark, lounging on the couch with a talk show blaring. I'd bite my tongue, rushing to finish client calls for my travel agency so I could scrub her floors. My laptop glowed late into the night as I caught up on work, exhaustion seeping into my bones. Patricia's criticism was relentless. The laundry's late again. She'd sigh. Or, this meatloaf's too salty. I'd cook bland meals to please her, shop for her favorite brands, all while juggling deadlines. I'd imagined her frail, needing care after her husband's death. But she was vibrant, striding through the house, nitpicking every task. James was rarely home, his concierge shifts stretching long, and when I hinted at Patricia's attitude, he'd laugh it off. Mom's just particular, Scarlett. She likes you, really. His words felt hollow, but I trusted him, hoping time would soften her. The strain was wearing me down. I'd stare at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, wondering if I was failing as a wife. My business was growing. I'd started an online travel platform, booking luxury tours for clients worldwide. But Patricia scoffed at my computer hobby, assuming I was freeloading. Her disdain stung, reminding me of every doubt I'd ever had about not going to college. I confided in Mom during a call, her voice steady. "You're enough, Scarlett. Don't let her dim your light." Her words kept me going, but the weight of Patricia's judgment was crushing. I didn't know how much longer I could hold on. 3 months into living with Patricia, she dropped a bomb over dinner. "James and I are planning a trip to France," she announced, her eyes gleaming. "Someone needs to stay and keep the house in order." Her words hit like a slap. I was expected to play maid while they jetted off. I glanced at James, waiting for him to correct her, but he just poked at his chicken, avoiding my gaze. That night, I pulled him aside. "James, did you know about this trip? Am I really not invited?" My voice trembled, hurt bubbling up. He sighed, rubbing his neck. "It's a misunderstanding, Scarlett. Of course you're coming. Mom just got it wrong." His reassurance felt flimsy, and when I said I wouldn't enjoy a trip with Patricia's attitude, he snapped, "Stop being so sensitive. It's a vacation, for God's sake. Why can't you get along with her?" His anger stunned me. I'd poured my heart into this marriage, into his family, and he couldn't see my pain. I lay awake, replaying his words, feeling like a stranger in my own home. The idea of traveling with Patricia, her snide remarks trailing me through France, was unbearable. My trust in James was cracking. How could he dismiss me so easily? I felt trapped, torn between love for him and the sinking realization that I was invisible in his world. Something had to give, and I sensed it was coming soon. The next morning, I decided to confront Patricia, hoping to clear the air. I didn't know it would be the moment everything unraveled. Breakfast the next day was a battlefield. James was home, a rare day off, and we sat at the dining table, the air thick with tension. I couldn't hold back anymore. "Patricia, you're trying to leave me out of the France trip, aren't you?" I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. She raised an eyebrow, smirking. "Scarlett, if you want to come, just say so. No need for drama." Her tone was mocking, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. James cut in, his voice sharp. "Scarlett, apologize to Mom. You're making a scene." I stared at him, betrayed. Before I could respond, Patricia leaned forward, her eyes cold. "Honestly, Scarlett, maybe you should stay home. A trip like this? It's too sophisticated for someone with just a high school diploma and lazing around on your laptop all day. Do you even deserve it?" Her words sliced through me, each one a jab at my worth. "I work, Patricia," I shot back, trembling. "I've told you about my business. I'm not unemployed." She laughed, a cruel sound. "Work. Tapping away at home isn't a job. You're living off James's money, a leech who doesn't belong here. Just leave." My chest tightened, her words echoing every insecurity I'd fought to bury. I looked at James, pleading for him to see me, but he shrugged. "Maybe you need to cool off, Scarlett," he said, as if I was the problem. That was it. The love I'd clung to shattered. Fine, I said, my voice breaking. I'm gone. I stood, grabbed my keys, and walked out. Patricia's parting shot ringing in my ears. Good luck scraping by, Leech. I didn't look back, but I carried the weight of their betrayal, already planning my next move. 3 months after I left, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. It was Patricia, her voice frantic. Scarlett, what's going on? We're drowning in collection notices. I leaned back in my Florida villa, the ocean breeze cooling my skin. You haven't paid the utilities, have you? I said calmly. She sputtered. I thought James was handling it. Why didn't you tell me you were paying for everything? Her shock almost made me laugh. For years, my travel platform had exploded, earning me $20 million, quietly covering their bills while Patricia called me a leech. The truth spilled out. Patricia had burned through her late husband's savings, living like a queen until the money ran dry. She'd leaned on James, assuming his resort job paid well, but he was barely scraping by. Worse, they'd racked up $440,000 in credit card debt, designer clothes, fancy dinners, all on my dime, thinking I'd never leave. You can fix this, right, Scarlett? Patricia pleaded. I pictured her smug face at that breakfast table, her insult still raw. After everything, you're asking for help, I said, my voice ice cold. James grabbed the phone. You're my wife. You have to help us. His desperation was pathetic. I'm in Florida, James, I replied. Got a vacation home here. Swing by if you can afford it. Their stunned silence was deafening. Oh, and check the caller ID. It's international. This call's on you. I hung up, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and triumph. They'd underestimated me, but I was done being their doormat. For the first time in years, I felt free, ready to reclaim my life. A week later, I flew back to Oklahoma to finalize the divorce. James met me at a lawyer's office, looking haggard, dark circles under his eyes. You were supposed to pay for the France trip, weren't you? He muttered, almost to himself. I wasn't surprised anymore. He'd counted on my money, just like Patricia, never grasping how I'd built an empire while they sneered at my hobby. I handed him the divorce papers, my signature bold and final. Good luck, James, I said, meaning it in a way that stung. He just nodded, defeated. Patricia and James were drowning in their $440,000 debt, their lavish habits catching up. I could have bailed them out. My business was thriving. But why should I? They treated me like dirt, assuming I'd always bend. Instead, I offered advice. Get jobs. Cut the spending. You'll figure it out. James's face twisted. You said you'd help, he snapped. I smiled, cool and steady. I did. I'm helping you learn to stand on your own. When you can afford a plane ticket, I'll show you my place in Florida. His jaw dropped, but I was already walking away. Back in Tulsa, I visited Mom, her pride shining when I told her everything. You're stronger than I ever dreamed, she said, hugging me tight. That moment washed away the pain of James's betrayal. I was done carrying their weight, done proving myself to people who'd never see me. My future was mine to shape, and I was ready to build it on my terms. Florida feels like a dream I never dared to have. My villa overlooks the Atlantic, waves crashing against shores, a far cry from Tulsa's dusty streets. Here, I rebuilt my life. My travel platform, now a global name, connecting people to adventures I once only read about. But the real joy came when I flew Mom out to live with me. She walked through the house, touching the walls like she couldn't believe it. Scarlett, you did this, she whispered, tears in her eyes. Seeing her relax, free from diner shifts, made every struggle worth it. Then came the surprise. Isabella Lopez, my old friend, had a place just down the coast. We'd lost touch after high school, but she'd built her own empire in event planning, now a CEO with a smile as bright as ever. Over coffee, we laughed about our burger days, swapping stories of our rise. She'd brought her parents to Florida too, and we spent evenings together, our families blending like we'd never been apart. We made it, Scarlett, Isabella said, clinking her glass against mine. For them and for us, I heard James and Patricia are scraping by, working long hours to chip away at their debt. I wish them no harm, but their lesson is theirs to learn. As for me, I'm home, not just in Florida, but in myself. I've learned my worth doesn't come from a degree or someone else's approval. It's in the life I've built, the love I give, and the dreams I chase. To everyone who's followed my story, thank you. You've walked with me through heartbreak, betrayal, and triumph. If my journey moved you, hit subscribe and join me. Every step forward is a story of grit, heart, and new horizons. Keep chasing your own dreams and I'll meet you where the waves crash and the possibilities are endless. Scarlett stared at the Atlantic from her Florida villa, the waves whispering truths she'd ignored too long. She'd learned that her worth wasn't tied to others' approval or a college degree. It was in the grit, heart, and dreams she'd fought for, no matter who tried to dim her light. That's my story of heartbreak, betrayal, and triumph. What's a moment that made you realize your own strength? Drop it in the comments. I'm reading everyone. Hit subscribe, share your thoughts, and let's keep chasing those endless horizons together.